Hi, my name is Charles, and today we'll be discussing the Code Blog's leak code challenges for Module 10. And those challenges are the exercises on leak code were group by, throttle, execute asynchronous functions in parallel, LRU cache, and top K frequent elements. All right, so the first problem we're looking at here is the leak code 2631 group by. So write code that enhances all arrays such that you can call the array.group by function method, and an array, it will return to be a group version of the array. So this just goes over what the uh, requirements are. Here's the code that we came up with. Ultimately, I'll give you a brief explanation of how the code works, and then I'll show you it running live in just a moment here. So the way I approached this was, first we wanted to create a variable by groups. We have the array.prototype with the group by method, and then we have the function fn here. And then we declared a variable groups that will store the key value pairs. And then for const item of this is referring to the array.prototype group by. And this function decides, this refers to the array because we added it to the array prototype. So basically, it just takes the arrays that are in this here, and then we generate a key using this function here, fn item. So we just call the function, and it gives it the it generates the key, and then if it's not a key, we don't. If it's not a group, then we don't generate the key there. So what that does is we initialize the key value pair. So excuse me, like here we have the key and then we have the value. So it'll generate the key, and then it'll populate the value to the key so it matches. And then we push the item using the push method, and then we return here. So this is how it'll render, but I'll show you in the answer here. And give me just 1 second. Boom. So as you can see, that was the correct answer. But when we go into Sublime Text, we can add that here. Now what we want to do, I want to go ahead and log the results to the console. So to do that, I just need to add a little bit of code here and show um, what the test is. So we have the console.log, and they already gave like a brief example there. So I already had this ready. It's 1, 2, 3. This is the array, and then it's grouped by the string. And then if we go ahead and run this, we should get, there we go. So we got the key value pair. So we have the key and then the value. So that's the first in the array, second and third. So 1, 2, 3, and then here we go, 1, 2, 3. So that's pretty much how that function works for the group by method. All right, so next up, the problem was throttle, but I was not able to access this problem because you need a premium account. So it says subscribe to unlock, but I did do some research here on throttling on CodeCamp. So basically, it just it explains pretty much what throttling does and how to implement it using JavaScript. So it's a technique used to limit the rate at which a function is called, transforms a function so that it can be called once in a specific interval of time. So if we have a function like we do down here, we set the timeout, and it contains the ID of the current timeout. We add a condition to the start of that throttle function, see if a timeout exists before calling the original function. So basically, we just give it a timeout variable, and that's pretty much how that works. I do look to do some practice problems on my own, and then we have some examples here, and that's throttling. All right, next up, LeetCode problem 2721, execute asynchronous functions in parallel. So I have the code over here. Just going to go over what I did real fast, and then we'll go ahead and test it. So the problem basically is to run multiple async functions in parallel and return all the results when they're done. So here's some of the inputs and outputs. So what I did, I created a new promise and execute all functions in parallel. I store the results in an array using their original index to preserve the order. And then after that's over, I keep track of how many were completed when they're all done, and then I'll resolve with the results. But if anything rejects, then it fails the whole operation. So on result, first I create the promise, which is return new promise, and then we have the two parameters or arguments here, resolve and reject. I log the results into a new into a variable called results, and it creates a new array and gives the length, and then we iterate through that here with the for loop. So the results, what this does, it keeps the array in the correct order, and then we count how many promises are finished. We initialize it to 0. And then the function here starts immediately. So it handles the success basically to save the results in the correct position right here. And then also it increments. We've got the counter here completed, and that's how many arrays went through and were completed there. And then for the failure, we have the catch reject, and then we just set it to immediately reject if any fail. So we'll go ahead and submit that. See what happens. And it's good to go. And then also here, if we run this here, this is the same code. So we've got everything set. And then we added the promises down here. So if it resolves, we should get 1, 2, and 3 in the terminal. If it fails, then we should get error. So we'll just go ahead and try it with the correct thing here. So it did resolve, and so we got 1, 2, and 3, and those are the array indexes. And then if we try to test the rejection here, let's see what we get. All right, and then we just got the error, something failed. So it failed immediately, but that's because the index here, it just returned. It did not show the index correctly. So that's that problem. All right, so next is the LRU cache, problem number 146 on LeetCode, and we've got the answer. Let me just go over how I arrived at this conclusion, and then I will do a test. So ultimately, the problem was to design a cache with a limited size that removes the least recently used item when it's full. So to do that, we had to create a few things here. LeetCode uses var in their answers, but I actually use a class here to declare the LRU cache, and so I use a map to store the key value pairs because it ultimately just preserves the order. So when a key is accessed, I delete and then reinsert it to mark it as the most recently used. So if the cache exceeds capacity, I remove the most recently unused item. So how I created the map was here. This cache, um, new map, and then we also have the capacity here. So now if it has this is how we generate the key here. So and if it's not found, then it'll return a -1. So if not, this has a key, return -1, and then we also delete the key, and then we set the key value pair here. So what it does, it'll move the item to the most recent, and then delete removes the old position, and then set adds it to the end. So here, then we get the return value. So that gives it, lets you know where it stands in the key value pair. And then if the key exists, we remove it first so that that we can refresh its position there. And then last is removing the key or the least recently used. So for that, we use the if cache size here, and this is how we evict the most recently unused position here. So map keys returns the key in order, and the next value gets the oldest key there. So we'll go ahead and submit this. So this was an accepted answer with LeetCode, and then we'll go into Sublime Code here, and we'll just go ahead and run it so I can show you more how it works here. We actually added some values in there, and so when we run that here, we got the cache. We just basically use the put method to get the values in there, and then so it'll return the uh, most recently unused one. So that's where we get this -1, -1, and then we get 3, and then we get 4. So that's it. So ultimately here, the cache output removes the second key, and then when we try to get that second key, it's already been removed, so it shows that value of -1. And then the same thing here. When we add 4 and 4 here, it removes key number 1, which is the oldest, because we already had set the capacity up here. And the result now, it'll be -1 for the first one, and then we got the other two values here, which are 3 and 4. And that's how that's done. All right, so now we're on LeetCode, problem number 347, top K frequent elements. Given an integer array, nums, and an integer k, and returning k, the most frequent elements, you may return the answer in any order. So here's our parameters here. We got numbers, k, and then we have another array to return here, the number. So at the top here, we have, excuse me, the first thing that we want to do is count the frequency. So we create a map here, a hash map, and store it in a variable called count. And then we basically count using a for loop to iterate through. So what this does is it tracks how many times each number appears. So example, like you get like 1, 1, 2. So basically it'll if 1 shows up twice, then it'll have the value pair of 2. That makes sense. If it shows up 3 times, it'll be 3. And then we create buckets, basically like an index. and basically we use the array property in the from method there, and the value lists the number of keys with that frequency. So if two keys were generated, then we got it'll show two buckets, one value. If that makes sense. And then we put the each number of the frequency into the bucket. So, and then we grab the top K elements using the result here, and we iterate through the bucket length and the results, and then we push those numbers, and then if it equals to K, then we return the result in the function there. So the simplest way is explaining this like count how many times each number shows up, and we put the numbers into boxes based on how often they appear. And then after that, we start with the biggest box and grab the top number, the K number. So, ultimately, no sorting is needed for this. Buckets let me group numbers by frequency, so I can retrieve the most frequent elements in a linear time without sorting. So if we go over here to the Sublime, we can go ahead and run this. And these are some of the arrays that I used here. So this was the first one, top K frequent. So basically we had the number, it should return 1 and 2. So we had 1 appear 3 times, 2 appear twice, but that was in that array. So we got, and then we also have 1 and 1. You can see it return the value of 1, and then down here is 1 and 2. And that concludes that. So that concludes the LeetCode challenges for Module 10. Definitely learning a lot. Some of the concepts were a little bit advanced and required me to do some research on W3 Schools, Free Code Camp in Indiana. I'm still learning, so I'm still getting all this stuff wrapped around and learning how to use it. But overall, I think I'm catching on. Thank you.